Welcome back to Alchemical Serenity, the pagan podcast that takes you on a personal journey into the woods, across the fields and moors, down to the beach where we can sit by the fire and talk all things pagan, druidry and witchy in a way that works with you on your path and journey. So I was thinking, as we move from winter into spring, what energies can we tap into? And one of those is plant energies. Now, many of you may already grow healing plants in your gardens to complement your food, add to balms and tinctures, maybe you make teas, all depending on how far you walk down the plant and medicine path. However, working with plant energy is a lot deeper because it works on a more shamanistic level. Grab yourself a cup of your favourite brew, as this is quite a long podcast and it might take me a day or two to record this, as I tried to be as informative as possible. So before we get started on plant energy, I need to explain about herbalism in the UK, or herbalism as it's pronounced in the US. I'm going to change the word to plant medicine where possible, because if you're on a herbalist path, you know it's not just to do with herbs, it's all plants, trees, flowers. And also I'm going to give you a bit of history into plant medicine in the UK. Now, obviously, we already know that our ancestors would have eaten plants. Of course we do. And along that evolutionary path, plants have been used for medicinal purposes. You may also probably know that the modern big pharma companies all rely heavily on plants, and a quarter of our prescription drugs in the UK at least are taken directly from or are derivatives of plants. I can't comment for around the world, but feel free to leave a comment if you know how many of your prescription drugs in your country are plant-based. That would be really good to know. Now, obviously, some of the most common ones that we're aware of is aspirin, which is known as salicylic acid, and it's found in willow tree bark and also in the plant meadowsweet. Now, I remember reading 20 years ago about salicin, as a house I was renting in the southwest of England had a wonderful willow tree, and I was doing some energy work with it and at the time, and I was just sitting beneath it, and I thought, there's something else about this willow tree. It's trying to tell me, and I couldn't understand what it was, and that was it. I went and looked it up on the internet. Now, obviously, from other points of view, if you have watched Harry Potter, you'll be familiar with Professor Sprout and mandrake plants and ear defenders. Okay, so that's a bit too much movie watching, but our plants come in different shapes and forms as far as energy is concerned, and one of them could be from a movie. Historically, as we have gone down the evolution of plant medicine, historically, in 2800 BC was the first written record of plant medicines, called the Pen Sao. And then in 400 BC, Hippocrates developed principles of happiness and diet and exercise, and that was the first Greek herbal was written at that time. 100 BC was the first illustrated Greek herbal was ever written. In 50 AD, the Roman Empire spread herbal medicine and plant commerce. 200 AD, herbalist, a gentleman called Galen, or Galen, depending on how you pronounce it, created a classification system for illness and remedies. In 500 AD, the physicians of Mythvi practiced the principles that Hippocrates had written down. In 800 AD, monks pioneered herbal medicine with infirmaries and the physic gardens in every monastery. 1100s, the physician Avicenna wrote the Canon of Medicine. Now, the Arab world was a major influence on medicine and healing. Now, then we had the Black Death in the 1200s, and apothecaries would bleed people, they'd purge them, they'd prescribe mercury and arsenic, which had no success, and then herbalists were desperately trying to stem the plague. 1500s, Henry VIII promoted herbal medicine, which I will come to in a moment. 1600s, Nicholas Culpeper wrote his famous herbal, the English physician, which simplified the practice of herbal medicine, and this was the first of the two-tier health system, where there were herbs for the poor and exotic plants and animal extracts for the rich. 1800s, very powerful drugs like mercury and laudanum became available over the counter, and serious side effects started to emerge and be reported. Herbal medicines became overwhelmed by mineral-based drugs, and the pharmaceutical industry called herbalism outdated. 1900s, there was a massive expansion of the international pharmaceutical industry after the Great War, also known as World War I, with the discovery of penicillin. Now, only a handful of herbalists were maintaining the tradition. The Pharmacy and Medicines Act of 1941 withdrew herbal practitioners' rights to supply patients with medicines. I will come to that one again a little bit further down the line. And then in 200 AD, the European legislation, 200 AD, 2000, in the year 2000, European legislation advocates that all herbal medicines should be subject to compulsory clinical testing comparable to that undertaken by conventional drugs, and all herbal medicines will be licensed. The UK government still is considering the possible impact on public perception of this legislation. Now, many people grew up with grandmothers passing down medicines, healing and recipes. And in the UK, we have our national insurance contributions, and historically this started at the turn of the 20th century. And I'm not going into that as it's irrelevant for this podcast, but this led to the National Health Service that we have today, where anyone can receive free treatment, but prescriptions are in effect paid for by most people except children, mums-to-be, people on benefits. I think serious health issues, etc. But, don't quote me on that. But most people who are employed will pay for their prescriptions. But having this wonderful NHS system, although it is underfunded and does need looking into, we have disconnected from our plants, and I think we've lost touch with the earth medicine. Now, I listen to many different podcasts on plant medicines, and they're usually from across the ocean in the US, where plant medicine has never been lost, and it's thriving thanks to groups of people in the 1970s, such as Rosemary Gladstar, who started protecting plants and seeds to ensure that we didn't lose them. And families from the native tribes use the same to this day. Nothing's been forgotten. And sadly, in the UK, herbalism became old wives' tales and folklore stories, and some remedies, although they were passed down, there are still many people who were lucky if they had an ancestor pass it down to them, but it's a very small percentage. So here in the UK, the government dictates what a herbalist can do. First and foremost, anyone wishing to practice herbalism or plant medicine must be insured. Now, to get this insurance, they must also prove that they have studied to a competent level, shall we say with a degree in clinical herbalism, and also must be part of a regulatory body. Now, there is at this time only one university in the UK that runs a 3-year course in clinical herbalism, which I think is incredibly sad. I believe that there are a couple of places that have like an apprenticeship scheme to train in herbalism, which will qualify you to practice, and where some insurance companies will accept these studies. But again, don't quote me on that one. Now, having grown up and used plants for many years myself, I did a short course online during lockdown for something to do, to be honest. I bet a few of you now listening in are going, yeah, that was me too. I was online doing all sorts of different courses. Now, I took a more in-depth course on family homeopathy as well, just for my own personal use. I have no intention of becoming a herbalist and treating clients. And furthermore, those courses online will definitely not get me an insurance or an acceptance into a regulatory body. They were purely there just for information, and they're great to use in your family. If you want to grow some herbs in the garden, or you find you've got some wild plants growing and you think, aha, I've just realised that's chickweed, what can I do with it? Now, I know many of you who are across the pond, or perhaps listening further in the southern hemisphere, were probably now listening and thinking, oh no, what? I was taught by my grandmother. It's all been passed down over the generations through our families. We make all our own products and tinctures and teas, and we sell all our own products. And you are incredibly lucky to be able to do that, because unfortunately in the UK we can't. So I mentioned earlier in the herbal timeline about Henry VIII. Now, if you are British and you know your you know your kings and queens, we all know who Henry VIII was, or at least we know how big Henry VIII was. Would you believe that he was actually a herbalist? Now, he studied plant medicine because he had so many issues from an overindulgent lifestyle, and he actually suffered with things like ulcerated legs. And he carried his own medicine chest with him wherever he went. But he also believed that all people should have access to medicine. And this led him to create the Herbalist Act of 1542, which stated that persons being no common surgeons may administer outward medicines. Now, in layman's terms, that basically was a charter that stated anyone who was skilled and knowledgeable enough in herbs could administer them to whomever he wished. Now, this allowed the commoners, as we are all known, back then, and probably still are, to receive treatments which would usually have been only for the upper classes and those who had enough money to pay handsomely for a physician. Now, this act provided an essential service to the public for over 500 years. But the Pharmacy and Medicines Act of 1941 withdrew herbal practitioners' rights to supply patients with medicines, and there was a huge public outcry which ensured that act was actually never put in place. Now, it was repealed in 1958 when the big pharmaceutical companies came along, and sadly the UK lags behind in the use of plants in medicines. France and Germany are well ahead of us in Europe, and of course you lucky people over that Atlantic pond have way more access to the knowledge, which is a shame for us over this side. Control was taken back again with the government in 2011 with another ruling which ensured all herbalists had to belong to a regulatory body in the UK and could only administer herbal remedies that they created themselves at their own premises and had gone through a clinical diagnosis with their clients beforehand. So, in other words, herbalists were no longer allowed to offer pre-made remedies to their clients. So that's why in the UK we are hanging on to our herbalist rights by a thread. And in fact, if you listen to David Hoffman on Rosemary Gladstar's podcast, he talks about his own frustrations with the UK and why he went to the US to practice many, many years ago. I felt I needed to explain all that lot because many of you I know listen in from the US, and I am hoping now you perhaps understand how much our hands are tied over here. So, as you've gathered, I'm not a herbalist. And I do use herbs in my world, but only for, obviously, personal use, as I've said. And my interest actually lies in the deeper connection with plants and trees on a sensory and energetic level. I've grown vegetables in my garden on and off over the years since I was about 9 years old. My great-grandfather was a market gardener. And from my regression practice, I know we carry memories in our cells down through our DNA. So at 9 years old, I'm out there planting things, and I had no idea where it came from. My parents didn't do any form of gardening apart from mow the lawn, cut the roses off, the heads off the roses, and pull out weeds. In fact, I remember one year I was absolutely distraught because I'd found a lovely area in the garden to put some carrots. And I'd grown these carrots from the seeds in my little greenhouse. And I put them out in the garden. I was so proud of myself because, I was probably under 11 years old at the time, only to find 3 weeks later my father is pulling them up out the ground because he thought they were weeds. When he realised what they were, he shoved them back in again. I don't actually think they grew that year. I think a bit too much damage was done to them. I remember being very slightly devastated. I'm not sure I grew anything the following year. I just thought, oh, bother. However, I have grown things since then. But it makes it, obviously you can hear me, it makes me giggle to this stage, just remembering how devastated I was to have grown something only to have it pulled out the garden. Now, if you've got a garden of your own, you might already be noticing that there are plants appearing, depending on your climate. Now, in the UK, our average growing hardiness is zone 8. However, if you are interested, I've added a UK link to the show notes if you want to go and just check. But most of the UK is zone 8. Now, I've spotted a lot of chickweed on a walk with my dog the other day, and it hasn't appeared yet en masse in my garden. I've got a lot of nettles on the way, though. Spring obviously doesn't begin until March. We have the meteorological start on the 1st of March and the astrological start of the vernal equinox on around the 21st of March. Now, I don't know whether you notice certain plants can come and go. Now, some years I can have a garden full of chickweed, it takes over, and then another year it's nettles or lovely cleavers. And I often wonder, are they telling me something? And I'm sure they are. Now, the art of sensory and energetic connection with plants isn't a new thing. I mean, for hundreds of years, people have connected with a tree, flowers, and plants of all kinds. And I remember in my late 20s, I was part of a spiritual group of people, and we all met once a month at a house of a wonderful lady in Leicestershire who was a spirit medium and part of the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain, also known as the SAGB. She held little classes for free all around at her house, and all she asked was for a donation each month into the pot on the way out to buy some fresh flowers, which she put in front of her spirit guide. She had a picture drawn of her spirit guide, and to buy some more tea bags and coffee, because we did drink quite a bit. Now, I was in either my late teens or my early 20s. Now, one evening, a gentleman joined us to do some psychic work, and we were all asked to bring in a flower, a favourite from the garden. But he didn't know who the flowers belonged to, and we were just to lay them on the tray up in her little room that we used to sit in. Now, I can't remember what flower I took, or in fact what his reading was for me, but my mother was with me, and she took in the most beautiful pink peony head. It was delightful. Actually, I think at the time I was kind of quite cross that she cut it out of the garden. Anyway, as soon as he picked up the flower, he said, "Ooh, someone suffers from really bad headaches, like migraine headaches. I can feel this in the weight of the head of this peony. And whoever this is, you've had them all your life. And in fact, you weren't coming tonight, were you?" He said, "because your headache was so bad." And this was very, very true. That afternoon, my mum had indeed suffered with a very bad migraine headache. And it wasn't until an hour before we were due to go, she decided she would go after all. Now, this to me is an example of energy exchange from my mum to the plant to the psychic. And this got me interested in energy and what else it could do. Jump forward about 5 years, and I went to a 2-day course on the art of feng shui. Again, I found energy and just about how placing, furniture and certain things in certain area, using a bagua, different positions, they can change the flow of chi. Now, here we go. Here's another one. The one big thing I learned from that was to never leave my toilet door open, as it was opposite the front door, and the money would come in the door and flow straight out through the toilet. Then the Reiki revolution hit Britain, and for 10 to 15 years you could get a Reiki certificate over the internet by distance healing in just about any modality. They were springing up all over the place. Now, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I've met some wonderful people who are trained in so many different modalities in Reiki. I know in the long run, to me, it's all the same use of energy, whether you take part in yoga or Reiki, energy healing, earthing. It's all the same thing, and to be honest, we need more of it. Plant energy can come for different reasons. Medically, through a herbalist treating symptoms, you can be eating your plants that grow organically yourself, and then by perhaps growing plants that we just sit and connect with in their own space. I've always maintained that the energy and goodness of a homegrown flower, plant, vegetable is the strongest in the first hour it's harvested. So, where does this leave us as far as sensory is concerned? Sensory energy does take time to develop. It's like anything really. Sensory is working with the senses, your own and your inner intuition. It includes being aware of other modalities of the system, such as Ayurvedic, astrological, chakras, Chinese medicine, Western medicine, the elements, the moon, seasons, wheel of the year, and a few more besides. And all these generally work with ingesting herbs and plants for medicinal purposes. But connecting with plant and I suppose in more energetically, I feel is a much deeper shamanic energy, and it helps us to learn about the plant first, then the plant and the way we are connected, and then about ourselves. Now, we can easily blunder through life along our paths, can't we? Taking any medication when required, maybe a few herbal teas, but until we stop and connect with the energy of the plant, either the ones we're ingesting through teas and supplements from a herbalist maybe, we're only actually receiving part of the healing. The earth has given us many ways to heal ourselves and to live long and eventful lives, but we need to be proactive on our paths and not reactive. In being proactive, we look to the plants, herbs, trees and energies of the earth to help us, and of course we help them. We know that trees need us to survive. We need the transference of carbon dioxide that we breathe out. The trees turn that back into oxygen. Now they turn it into oxygen because they need our carbon dioxide. We work together, but there is a deeper level of healing and energy too. Now, one of those is the art of Shinrin-yoku, or perhaps know it as forest bathing. If you haven't heard of it, it's the art of sitting amongst the trees or with a certain tree to receive healing for lots of different purposes. And it's actually it's quite an interesting thing to take part in. We do the same with plants in the garden, or if you've got them on a balcony, you've got perhaps a window ledge, perhaps there's a park close by, we can just sit with a plant and connect with its energy. So what now? Now, if you've got this far without switching off, nodding off, or thinking, oh dear, she's lost the plot again, then I'm hoping you're interested in working with plants and trees for your own health benefits. Now, if you like to meditate, then this is a good way of working with your plants, especially if you have taken time to grow them yourself from seeds. Now, growing them yourself is a much safer way than buying them from a place like the supermarket, where we have no idea what has been used to grow them or spray them with. So, when you buy, and I've done it myself, you buy in a herb like coriander or parsley, and you get them in the little pots, but there's nothing to say that they are necessarily organic, and we don't know what's been sprayed on them and where they've come from. It's much better to go out and buy the organic seeds and, grow them yourselves, because things are washed in Milton, aren't they? A lot of stuff is actually washed in a solution of Milton before we buy them. So grab yourself a few pots, save up those inners of the toilet rolls. They are brilliant. And grow your own, and try and find some organic compost and some seeds from your local garden merchant. Now, the nurturing element of growing the seeds starts with the seeds, with your connection to that energy, connecting with the seeds, sending them energy from yourself as you plant them, thanking the goddess, Mother Earth, for all those involved as well, for who took part in getting the seeds to you, especially the plant for producing it as you go into a new cycle of growth with the seed. Stage 2 would be to plant your seed and take time again to send energy to the plant from yourself for its growth. Now, you can continue to do this as the plant is growing. Try and be barefoot so that the energy from the land works its way through you to the plant. If you have space outdoors to grow your own plants in the garden, then follow on whatever you need to do for full-on potential growth. You know your garden best and where the plant will grow. It might only be a few carrots or some peas, but these can grow easily in pots. And one lesson I learned was to grow carrots in compost bags. When you buy your bag of compost and it's it's taller it's taller than it is wide, but it's to tip it over, and instead of cutting the top of the bag, you're cutting down the side, and you make it into a wider bag, and you can use the depth of that bag for carrots and for potatoes, and they can be easily produced in those bags. And so rather than having to buy the compost, empty it out, put it into something else, just use the bag. It's so much easier. And to be honest, my potatoes have grown any way possible. I've even left potatoes and forgotten to harvest them, and they've come back the following year and they've gone absolutely bonkers. I'm actually just chitting my potatoes right now. Stage 3, if you're growing flowers in your garden, work with the flower and learn about its subtle energies as it grows. Now, here you'll learn about the renewal of life, death and rebirth, especially if you're working with any flower that you deadhead and wait for a new one to appear, like roses or maybe sweet peas. Step 4 is cutting flowers for your home. Now, talk to the plant and let it know of your intention to take it into the house and enjoy it further. Now, the plant will let you know when to cut or not. Vegetables, you can infuse them with Reiki energy as they grow, and then again let the plant know it's time for you to take them. And when ready to harvest, remove them, cook and eat within an hour if you can for maximum energy. Thank the main plant, or if it's a one-off item, say a carrot that you've grown, it's just an act of honouring the plant and its energy, and maintaining the positive energy that you've put into it for all that time, and ensuring it isn't lost. And that goes back into the earth, but it also goes through you and your system. Small changes like this within you and within the whole energy system, they make big changes into the earth. So if you're growing plants in pots or on a window ledge, it's all the same, even down to those tiny little microgreens. You can work with the plants and be part of its growing. And over a period of time, you should notice the shift as well in your own consciousness and that of the plants you're working with. And ultimately, this will also help the planet. Meditate or just sitting with the plants in various stages of growth give us some real insights into the plant world and insights into yourself. Now, obviously, you don't have to grow your own plants. You can use intention to focus on finding a plant that wants to work with you and come into your energy field and come home with you from a garden centre or a nursery. However, don't send out intentions for a specific plant at this stage, as you don't want an oak tree, for example, if you've only got a small garden, or perhaps you've got a balcony. Send a thought out into the universe and let it bring the two of you together, that you are looking for a plant that will work with you, that you have the space for, and that will be easy to grow, that you can connect with. And then look for signs when you're out and about, especially if you're at a garden centre or a nursery, wherever you get your plants from, especially if they're grown from scratch and not imported in. Take a gentle walk around and let your own energy field douse for the plants. Sometimes, I've always said, try squinting your eyes. Sometimes if we don't quite look properly, or maybe you'll see it in your peripheral vision, something will attract you and you'll think, oh, what was that? And that's the plant trying to communicate with you. We kind of have to look slightly more relaxed. Rather than staring at something, just let your eyes soften and just feel the energy pull towards you. Take your time and spend a few moments with a plant. Now, you might go to a garden centre or to a nursery and just come out and go, well, I didn't find anything in there. Well, that's fine. That's because you and the plant aren't ready yet to connect. Don't get frustrated. Just go home and think, okay, the plant is out there and it will come to me. Because there's no linear time to any of this. This will happen when the energy is right, not necessarily the time. Now, not all plants want to converse with you, and I wouldn't go wandering around talking to every single plant out loud. keep what you're saying in your head. Otherwise, you might get a few people looking at you. I mean, I've spoken to plants, but generally I have somebody else next to me, and I don't feel such a fool having a chat with a plant when perhaps my daughter's out with me. Now, she thinks mum's absolutely mental, but I will talk to a plant because she's standing next to me and I don't feel as bad or as conspicuous, because a lot of garden centres have cameras on and I'm sure they go, oh, look, she's back. That's the one there that talks to the plants. So working with the energy of plants, just remember, not all plants will want to talk to you. So don't get frustrated if a plant isn't ready to communicate. One way you can also spend time is just sitting with the energy. Plants are here to teach us what we need to learn. Trees, for example, have been here thousands of years and they talk to each other, which has been scientifically proven. Now, this all goes to show that the plant kingdom has a consciousness that we have the ability to connect with. Now, I say ability. This is not a right that we have, neither is it an entitlement. If the plant kingdom don't want to work with any of us, we'll get nothing from the plants we work with. It just takes time to find the right balance of energy to work with the plant. And sometimes if we're not working with the plant properly, then we've got an energy balance going on perhaps within ourselves that we need to work on as well. bare feet on the ground. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called grounding or earthing, where you're barefoot on the ground, on the grass or perhaps mud, and letting the energy flow for 20 to 30 minutes a day through your feet is a wonderful way of health benefits, actually. I was quite surprised. I mean, we all have a great time, don't we? Going barefoot on a really warm day in the park or in the garden, just feeling the grass beneath your feet. That is a wonderful sensation, but it's actually doing us more good than we realise. That's another way of doing it. Just sit down, barefoot, walk, sit in the garden, get out the deck chair, and just feel the energy flowing through you. Now, King Charles is well known in the UK for talking to plants. Now, we all might have scoffed a few years ago. I remember when it came out that he quoted that he talked to his plants, and I think we all sort of went, oh, what? But, it's now coming back round, isn't it? He knew what he was doing. He knew about talking to plants. For whatever reason, he was communicating with them, and now we're doing it, and it's becoming second nature to us. So what are good plants in spring to work with? If you look out in your own gardens, obviously you're going to know your local area, you're going to know your garden or whatever pots you've got perhaps on your patio. If you've got something that you can work with already, that's brilliant. Coming up at the moment, obviously in the Northern Hemisphere, we are turning into spring, so nettle and plantain are out there for their leaves. Dandelions, whatever you do, don't kill the dandelions. My mother goes around every year and tries to pull all the yellow heads off, and I'm like, leave the blooming dandelions alone. I like the dandelions, thank you. Absolutely, I adore dandelions. I remember going as a kid with my next door neighbour to collect dandelion flowers because he made dandelion wine. And I can still smell it now. When you think of certain things that conjure up in your mind, but collecting dandelions, and I can still smell that yeasty smell that you get when wine is bubbling through the demijohn. I can still smell that now, and I was probably, probably in my tweens, I'd have thought. Daisies for their external healing properties. They're good ones that you may find easily in your garden. So my next podcast is going to be talking about the spring herbs and how to work with them on an energetic, sensory level and what they can teach us holistically. However, for now, my advice is to go out and look in your garden either for plants that are coming up that you would like to connect with as the season turns. You might find there's a plant already in the garden that's kind of going, hello, I'm over here. I've been asleep, but I'd quite happily come and chat with you. And go and talk to those plants and see how you get on with those ones. Go out to a garden centre if you want to and have a wander around. Look for plants and just spend your time connecting with the energy. This is a whole shift in consciousness, and it's a change in the way your energy exchanges within the plant kingdom. And it is a wonderful energy exchange to do, but it does take a little time to just ease yourself into it, because there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's all about your energy. So I can say to you, this is what you need to do, but you will then have the time to work that through your system. Maybe if you work with Reiki or you go to yoga classes, Tai Chi, you might find connecting with plants is a little bit easier. But it doesn't matter how quickly it comes, how slow you are. It's all about your energy system. So take your time to just go and work with a few plants and see where this shift of consciousness and shift of energy exchange takes you. So thank you for listening in, for being part of this amazing path that we're on. Please like and subscribe. It's all free and I don't spam anyone. Leave a comment if you like to chat about your path and any experiences that you're having. That's always great to hear from people. Let's build a community of people who will come together to listen in and see if there is something you like and can work with on your path. Now, we're all here for different reasons, and in listening in, you may find your purpose in life or an addition to your purpose and why you're here. Now, if you want to support my channel, you can find me on Patreon. and where for a price of a very cheap cup of coffee, you can get a tarot card reading each week for that week ahead, and can ask me questions, and I'll sort of do a Q&A on any of the readings. So that's kind of monthly subscription of, I think it's something like $5 or £3, which is a very cheap cup of coffee in this country. I'm working on another tier on the podcast at the moment, but I haven't got far enough into that one. That's probably going to be later in the year. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram as Alchemical Serenity, so give me a look up there. My Patreons supporting the channel, I've got to say thank you to Kate and Karen. Once again, thank you, ladies, for buying me my coffees. And I'll be back again soon to talk plants, and also there's a podcast coming up about the vernal equinox and how we can work with those energies too. So for now, I will see you again soon, and yeah, bye for now.